This is the EdUp Experience podcast where we make education your business. On this special bonus episode of the EdUp Experience podcast, we have a simultaneous release with The Evolution by Modern Campus, who's released their podcast Illumination with an interview with their host Amrit and me, Joe Sallustio, as the guest. This will be released on Evolution by Modern Campus and on the EdUp Experience podcast simultaneously. Here you go and enjoy, guys.
Welcome to Illumination by Modern Campus. Through this series, we speak to higher education thought leaders about the trends, ideas, and opportunities that are shaping the future of this industry, and pick their brains for best practices and advice that leaders can apply to their own institutions. I'm Amrit, the editor-in-chief of The Evolution and host of Illumination by Modern Campus. On today's episode, I reconnect with Joe Sallustio, an absolute trailblazer in the higher education podcasting space. He's the incoming Senior Vice President of Lindenwood Global at Lindenwood University and co-founder of the EdUp Experience podcast. Joe chats about the process of launching a new division within a historic institution and reflects on how higher education leaders can innovate from inside the sometimes static walls of a post-secondary institution. Let's get into it. Thank you so much for joining us on Illumination by Modern Campus.
I'm very excited to be here, my friend.
Well, I'll tell you, it feels like a long time coming. And this is, a deep cut for folks who listen to The Evolution, who are readers of The Evolution. You'll know that we have a partnership with the EdUp Experience. We've been working with you guys since you launched. And my first ever podcast was with Joe and Elvin.
And you nailed it.
Yeah, well, hell, when was that? That must have been, it was before you even started the EdUp Experience. That was with,
that's right.
Yeah, that was,
I forgot about that. Yeah.
Ages ago. Mm-hmm. So a fun introduction to the world of podcasting, which in typical higher ed fashion happened about 6 or 7 years after podcasting became popular. Right. That's okay. We skate on. So I'm so glad you're joining us on Illumination. And for those of you listening on the EdUp Experience, as we're going to be cross-posting this episode, my name's Amrit. I'm the editor-in-chief of The Evolution. And for those of you who are Illumination listeners who might be new to EdUp Experience, Joe, do you want to introduce yourself and EdUp?
Sure. So I'm Joe Sallustio. I'm co-founder along with my compadre Elvin Freitas of the EdUp Experience podcast, where we have about 2 years in to podcasting or so. We've done about 370 episodes, which is insane, over 100,000 downloads, all focused on higher ed. And you've been a guest. You were a guest, Amrit, I don't know when, like episode 60 something maybe?
Early on.
Yeah, and then I'm a new senior vice president of Lindenwood Global at Lindenwood University.
Hey, and congratulations on that role. I mean, that's why we're having this conversation today, because the work that you're doing to launch that division, it's really interesting across a number of levels. So on the one hand, it's starting a new division, which is interesting in and of itself. But Lindenwood University is obviously, well, I wouldn't call it a traditional institution because our friend Rob Westervelt might send me an email, but it's a historic institution. It's got a legacy. And in launching Lindenwood Global, it suggests a new direction for the institution. So can you chat a little bit about what you're anticipating as you're launching something innovative, new, and future-oriented within an institution that's historic and steeped in tradition?
So much around higher ed right now is circumstance. It's circumstance, and it's who's willing to take the circumstance that we're presented with. It's like the cards that you're dealt, and make something out of those cards or fold. And what really attracted me to Lindenwood University, which of course it's founded in 1827. So when you talk about historical, 994 years of history and absolutely tradition, right? It's one of the fundamental value propositions of Lindenwood is its tradition. And tradition can be looked at both in a positive and negative way. I think when we hear the word tradition in higher ed, sometimes we look at that negatively when it comes to barriers to disruption or barriers to innovation. Tradition absolutely can be a barrier, right? But tradition as a fundamental value proposition for innovation is what really attracted me to Lindenwood. There's as you mentioned, Rob Westervelt, he was a selling point for me, innovator and thought leader within higher ed. The president, Dr. John Porter, he's a 33-year veteran of IBM and not higher ed, which makes that attractive. Fast thinkers, agile thinkers. But, Lindenwood's also the second oldest university west of the Mississippi. And there was this great allure to go, what do mid-tier brand recognized institutions do for sustainability into the future? And Lindenwood is doubling down on its online initiative, Lindenwood Global, to expand its operations to the online adult market. And I saw that and I went after it, and I was lucky enough to be hired. It's going to be a journey, right? Because when you create infrastructure, you've got to work within the existing systems, which I'm excited to do because I believe the leadership team and all the employees I've been able to meet so far are all ready for this. They're primed and ready for this growth. So that's what makes it exciting.
Let's talk a little bit about what Lindenwood Global is before we start getting into some of the what I think is going to be a fascinating piece of balance. But just briefly walk through, what is Lindenwood Global?
Lindenwood Global, right, is a concept right now and becomes a reality here very quickly. As Lindenwood works with an online program manager for some of its online programs, but simultaneously they want to build Lindenwood Global, and that's to future-proof the organization and the institution, and prepare them for long-term sustainability in the online space. When we're talking about Lindenwood Global, it's going to truly be exactly what it sounds like. It's a online initiative with a global context, serving the adult student market and maybe the traditional student market. When I say traditional in that way, I mean the 18 to 22-year-old that's looking at college that maybe says, I don't want to go to an on-ground campus. I want to take an online bachelor's degree. So it's the pipeline, it's the choices, it's the flexibility, it's the agility that Lindenwood Global will be there to capture part of the market that is not interested in going purely on ground, and is not, and is there. They have a number of programs that are primed for growth, and we're gonna grow it. So when you say what is it, it's the beginning of a large online division.
Absolutely. It's neat when you talk about the sort of the crux of Lindenwood Global coming out of the idea of, how do we begin to build an independent structure around online education as opposed to relying on the pre-existing relationship with an OPM. We're seeing more and more of that. It's what I've found fascinating about it is the idea of, where does an institution partner, right? And generally speaking, you find partnerships that take care of the core peripheral things that the institution does, so that you can focus time and energy on the core. And it's always exciting to watch the transformation of what the core of the institution is. Because in developing Lindenwood Global, in investing in building an infrastructure, an ecosystem, and a culture of online education, Lindenwood seems to be suggesting that online education is part of its strategic core. It is the future of what that institution wants to do.
I think that's absolutely right. And a big part of what is going to make this unique, Lindenwood Global unique from other online initiatives and other online institutions, is the tradition. It's going to be, the students are going to be part of a 194-year-old institution, and possibly in an online environment. But that connection, that history is going to be important, right? And so you can take what, you can get an online degree pretty much anywhere if you want to, right? And many online institutions are newer. They're not, they don't have a 194-year-old history. So that history and that value proposition of the core is going to be built into the extension, as it were, of online education. And I really believe the flexibility is the future, right? And I was talking to a group of folks the other day, and they were talking about traditional institutions, about those that have history moving to online and the barriers that exist, whether it's within faculty or curriculum or resources capacity. But one of the biggest things was, should we? And Lindenwood has answered that question. They've said, yes, we are. We should, we are. These many other institutions are saying, should we, because they don't know how to navigate those barriers. I'm lucky enough to come in at a time when those barriers have been navigated, if they existed at all, because they would have been there before or eliminated before I came on board. So I'm walking to this pure blank white canvas, and I'm going to probably splatter paint that sucker for a little while until I figure out how to brush it the right way, because you're talking about infrastructure, Amrit. You're talking about marketing infrastructure that needs to exist, because there's a difference between organic, traditional marketing and Google PPC and search engine optimization marketing. Big difference. You're talking about shelf space. Where does Lindenwood Global sit in the options for enrollment? How much attention is it paid in a website or in social media? All of that is going to be about balance and competing priorities, but finding the balance within those priorities.
Absolutely. And your background is in marketing and enrollment management. Is that a natural fit as you look to the work that you're going to be doing at Lindenwood Global? How confident are you in the structure that you're going to be building, given your background in the marketing and enrollment management space?
Yeah, I'm confident. I'm confident because I know what to do. I've done it at a number of universities in the past. What makes this unique and exciting is that there are existing systems to pull from at Lindenwood University, rather than at my last institution where literally nothing existed and there was no one to do it. There is an infrastructure that exists that recognizes that this is the future, so there's some built-in resources to pull from. Now, I may recreate those resources within Lindenwood Global, but for the time being, I'm not alone. There is a very supportive leadership team, and they are driven, and there is disruptive innovation happening in conversations every single day, even during the interview process, about what's the future? How do we get there? What are you seeing? How do you see it? That's the kind of curiosity we need to have, right? If we're going to survive, as higher ed is going to thrive in the future.
Absolutely. One thing I'm very intrigued by as you step into this role is, drawing back on the nearly 200 years of history within Lindenwood, and your point at this very beginning of this, that's not a barrier. That's an opportunity. It's a benefit. It's an advantage. How do you reflect the best of 2 centuries of history and tradition in this entirely new endeavor that is foundationally sort of built on what's new, interesting, and exciting about higher ed?
That's a critical question, and it's rooted within the 5-year strategic plan that Lindenwood University has put forth. You take that 194 years of history, you look at what the future is going to be. And if you look at Lindenwood University's 5-year strategic plan, of which Lindenwood Global is one of the items within that strategic plan, the guidance is there, right? All of that history, all of that tradition is built within a 5-year strategic plan that helps define what the future looks like for Lindenwood University, and future-proofs the university against any obstacles that exist in the future in the higher ed ecosystem. So that strategic planning and that vision is really important. So I'm very lucky to come in with a completed, backed, vetted, and a strategic plan that's being implemented and realized on a daily basis at Lindenwood today.
Absolutely. And, I'll tell you something, as the editor-in-chief of The Evolution, I've had the great fortune to work with so many folks across the post-secondary space and, benefited immensely from the fact that most of what I do is just chatting with innovative people about their innovative work. And you absolutely are living that life as you're the host of the EdUp Experience. That's what you do. I think you said you have 370 some episodes over the course
just
of
about
600 some days. As you look to your role as an innovative post-secondary leader, how important are those opportunities to engage with other innovators to shaping your own thinking about what something like Lindenwood Global can look like and how it's going to continue to evolve and reshape as you move into the future?
Massively critical, because no one knows, right? There's no crystal ball that exists. And that's what I've learned through podcasting, and I'm sure you're learning too, is that we all want to have all the answers, but no one has any answers. We're testing. We're A/B split testing. That's what I like to say. Higher ed has finally found its true marketing home, and A/B split testing. Should I test ground against online against ground, and against hybrid, and so it becomes this testing environment. But there is a future for higher ed outside of what higher ed looks like today. I've talked about it with you before, where I say, Could it look more like a technology company? Could it look more like a hotel chain company? Could there be different systems built in that are built around curriculum, because the curriculum and the faculty are obviously central in the lifeblood of the university, but how somebody experiences higher education can be guided by other industries that are more innovative and faster, right? So that's that disruptive innovation that has to be embraced. I'm not saying I'm a disruptive innovator, although I think I am to some degree. There are others that are much better at it. And I'm going to pull from every single piece of information I ever gained, including from you, and say, wow, this is what I think. I can take all these ideas and craft what I think the best response is for the future of Lindenwood Global based on everybody's thought process. And I think that's you know, I don't know, the collating all of those thoughts together that's going to be the real difference maker.
I mean, it's an interesting basis. And as you look across the industry and think about, you know, our own colleagues in the, I guess, this new era of professional development, where so much of it is finding opportunities to connect with folks maybe outside of the traditional conference environment, what advice do you have to share with folks who are looking to expand their thinking around what higher ed could be, what their divisions could be doing, and where they see the space going?
They should listen to our podcasts. I'll tell you that. That's where I'd start. Listening to our podcasts would be a great start. And there are other higher ed podcasts out there that are worthwhile. That's one way to do it. I do believe very greatly, massively, and highly in LinkedIn connections. I think there's a lot of conversation that happens within LinkedIn. If you take advantage of it, it opens up everyone to new ideas, groups, and which, of course, I started a LinkedIn thought leadership group called the Higher Ed Heavyweights. And there were, 20, 30 members over time. It was LinkedIn's first higher ed pod, as it were, and we all helped each other with our thought leadership. And look at the connections that came out of that. All sorts of things came out of that pod, books and podcasts and white papers and all these things that everybody has gone on to do. And we all supported each other through that. So LinkedIn is one way to do it. And higher ed professionals don't take advantage of LinkedIn. They don't, but that's where I would go. That's where I do go. I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn with those connections. You know, in 2 years, just with activity, I went from, 2,000 connections to almost 10,000, you know, and so it created a thought leadership network for myself. I'm going to pull on every single one of those resources when I go into Lindenwood Global. You know, I'm going to go back and, every I'm going to do the Italian side of me, every favor you gave me, I'm coming back. I'm coming back for the favor. But it's true, because we help each other. And so I want to get that help now as I start Lindenwood Global. And it's going to be a wild, fun, crazy ride.
No, absolutely. And for folks who think we're just plugging our own podcasts here,
maybe a little.
I'm gonna take it a step further. Both the EdUp Experience and Illumination by Modern Campus are listed on Feedspot's list of the 50 best higher ed podcasts. That is to say, go look at the rest of that list. There are some amazing podcasts that are listed there that you may not have seen before, had access to. These are great channels to think about and learn about what's happening in the space. So I'd absolutely recommend, if you're looking for a new Saturday morning listen, go to feedspot.com and search for their best 50 higher ed podcasts. It's a great list. Joe, that pretty much does it on is there anything you'd like to add about the work that you have on deck at Lindenwood and where you see this sort of ride taking you?
No, I think I've said it. I've said it all. I'm just very excited to be with an institution that is taking the bull by the horns and looking at the future of higher ed and saying, we're going to invest in online learning as a complement to our tradition and our core business. And I'm excited to work with the leaders at Lindenwood to make that real. And I feel very lucky to have the resources to do it and the backing, so to speak, to do it. And it's going to be fun, and I welcome anybody who wants to come along for the journey to follow. Connect with me on LinkedIn. Check out the EdUp Experience podcast, and we'll keep you up to date on how it goes. I feel like it's a good case study for those old traditional historical institutions that have said, yeah, we're going to do this. It's going to be a beautiful case study of success.
Well, we're absolutely going to be keeping an eye on it. And Joe, thank you so much for taking the time out to chat today.
Thank you.
This episode is brought to you by Modern Campus in partnership with the Evolution. Modern Campus empowers higher ed institutions to thrive when radical change is required to deal with lower student enrollments and revenue, rising costs, crushing student debt, and even school closures. Powered by the industry's only student-first modern learning engagement platform, Modern Campus supports every corner of the modern institution, from continuing and workforce education, to student affairs, to the registrar's office, to marketing and IT. To find out more on how you can transform your institution to meet the needs of the modern learner, visit moderncampus.com. That's moderncampus.com.